Hello and welcome to World Today with me, Abdullah C. Tonight we're looking at why ECOWAS couldn't still adopt the proposed ECO common currency for West Africa. We'll also discuss Britain's controversial asylum deal with Rwanda. To discuss this, I'm joined by historian Hazum Sise and economist Yang Jai. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Good evening, thank you.
Straight to the point, it's been nearly 20 years since we heard about this ECO thing. Economist Yang Jai, why the delay?
Thank you so much. I think first, before the delay, we need to understand one thing about the ECO. It is a currency that is needed for the growth of the ECOWAS zone. Now, you have two things that should be a prerequisite before the establishment of a common currency. And these are the convergence criteria. One is primary, the other is secondary. And what's more important is the inflation rates, the deficits of these countries. So before the zone can kick off, we all have to be within a respectable range to make sure that when the zone kicks off, there won't be imported inflation within the zone, meaning one country within the zone having prices that are higher than the other country, then it will create an issue that we call arbitrage. I will come and buy goods, let's say a bottle of Coca-Cola so cheap here, just take it next door and sell it when the value should have been the same across the zone.
What is the way out of the situation?
Well, the way out of the situation is simple. We lack the political will from the governments, starting with the presidents and the ministers of finance. Why? One of the biggest problems to date is I think all the countries in the zone at one point or another has met most of the convergence criteria, but they couldn't sustain it. Why? Because we have bloated deficits. We're borrowing too much from our central banks as is. So basically, when you have a common currency, our central banks will relinquish power to the zone's central bank, and when that happens, countries will lack the ability to raise money way more than what is expected. Let's say if the Ecozone say that the deficit financing for each country shouldn't be more than 10% of their budget, we cannot bust the ceiling because we're not in control of the bank. So and that's the political will that's lacking.
There'll be no individual central banks for countries. They'll just have one bank.
And naturally, that's how it works.
Just like the Eurozone.
I mean, if you look at the Eurozone, if you look at the CFA zone, it's the same. And when that happens, our economies converge. When the economies converge, the central bank handles the monetary management and monetary policy of the whole zone. So now that needs political power to be relinquished. And our political leaders are not ready for that. But events that are happening within West Africa is forcing us to find ways to expedite and make this happen.
Okay, great. Hazum, the historical context.
Well, thank you very much. I think, he's right. Why it has not happened, there is a historical reason for that. And basically, it's the neo-colonial economic interest, particularly within the Francophone, space. There is a common currency, called the CFA, which sort of binds all the former French countries to France. And for one reason or the other, and I'm sure my brother will talk to this.
Okay, for clarity, we have two CFA zones.
Well, for West Africa and for Central Africa. And for one reason or the other, these two zones mean a lot to the former metropolitan power, France. And I think, he will help, to, explain why they are so unwilling to let go of these two, monetary zones.
Would it be fair to blame only France? The countries not willing participants.
Well, he mentioned the lack of political interest, but there must be a reason. Sometimes I think it has to do maybe with blackmail, such that whenever you think there's a breakthrough towards the ECO, one or two of these, countries, in the safer zone, will raise, like a false alert. So there is like, this wet blanket, approach that whenever there is a breakthrough, like a country will say, oh no. And usually they make the announcement just after meeting, somebody in Paris.
Yeah, but can the countries that are ready, can they go ahead? Not all French countries or former French colonies are in the CFA zone. Guinea-Conakry is not. Mauritania is not.
Well,
yeah. So
I'm happy you mentioned, the Guinea-Conakry case. Maybe, in fact, we should, spend a minute to look at that. Because after independence, in 1961, Sékou Touré abandoned, the CFA zone. But he lived to regret it. Because within, 1 month, France had flooded Guinea, okay, with, fake, silly notes. Silly is the name of the new currency now. And there was a time, by the end of 1961, the silly was as worthless as the Dutch mark was, before Hitler came to power in Germany. And I think, there is this fear among many of the French-speaking countries that you don't just leave the CFA zone like that. If you do it, what might follow could be like what happened to Sékou Touré, like a collapsed economy.
Mauritania did, and nothing happened.
Well, the Uguya came in 71. Yes, absolutely. Nothing happened. But one thing that in Mauritania is different from the other countries in the Francophone zone is that they have really, for a very, very long time, carved sort of an independent enclave within the Francophone zone. And particularly after the country was declared an Islamic Republic, and Arabic became like the official language. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. We would like to blame outsiders, but looking inwards, what do you think is really wrong?
Well, before I get into that, I want to put two things in perspective. The CFA zone is already a functional monetary union. Functional, meaning it's operational, it's working. So today, the CFA zone can migrate to ECO seamlessly. They have a central bank. The common currency is working. Their convergence criteria are all within acceptable range or ranges, so that's not a problem. But what's happening right now is France is under pressure. When the CFA was established, French franc was what was backing the CFA. Then when Europe decided to come together, Europe came up with the euro. So the Eurozone accepted that conditionally we will allow France to still use their gold reserves and back the CFA, but we will give them a timeline to exit. And that timeline has already elapsed, and now the Eurozone is telling France, you can no longer back the CFA, and that's why sometime last year there was a meeting and the French-speaking say, we will start the euro, then later the English-speaking will meet us. So the problem is not the French-speaking. They have a functional monetary union called the CFA. The problem is us, the English-speaking. And from 2001 to date, we are not ready to have a currency, not because our economists cannot absorb it. Our politicians lack the appetite, lack the will, because today I'll give you a simple example and I'll contextualize it within the Gambian context. If you want to build a road and you don't have donor funds, you said you will use what you call GLF, Gambia Local Fund, you go and spend through the budget. But if the revenues are not there, you take deficit financing. And if you take deficit financing, it's borrowing from the central bank. But when you're within a zone, the rule will say you cannot borrow, let's say, more than 10% of your previous year's budget. It means you cannot break your ceiling.
Yeah, but you don't think if you are within the zone, that gives you more bargaining power?
If you're within the zone, it gives you, and especially your people, more bargaining power. First, you have what you call exchange stability. Your currency will be stabilized. If your currency is stabilized, you have predictability. If you have predictability, commodities tend to be priced better.
So that outweighs the downside of having your own currency.
Having your own currency is the worst thing that's happening in this world, because if you look at the world, the geopolitics of the world has changed from nation states to communities. America created NAFTA, Mexico, Canada, US. You have The Caribbean, they have their thing. In Africa, you have SADC, you have COMESA, you have ECOWAS. But the problem is the political will to really converge is what's stalling this. And we are not better off having a Dalasi. We are better off having a currency better than the Dalasi to give Gambians a livelihood that is more decent.
What do you think is the role of Nigeria, being the largest economy?
Nigeria and Ghana plays a significant role in moving forward this, and they should be the pace setters. Why? They're big economies. If Nigeria and Ghana happens to meet the convergence criteria, it will be easier for others because there will be pressure. But Nigeria itself don't want to. Why? Nigeria literally has torn itself into what you call a single commodity economy, which is oil. You know, predominantly their revenues come from oil, and we know what they do in terms of transactions. So they still want to be in charge of their central bank rather than someone else be in charge of their central bank, because what they will do selling oil will impact on the balance of payment account and the current account of the economic zone, and we will see some of the irregularities that are happening.
Hazum, historically, do you think big things changing, looking at history from independence of today, how our countries have been behaving?
Well, I want to reply that to my brother that currencies have become one of the symbols of nationhood, independence, and sovereignty, just like the flag and the anthem. The Dalasi, for example, has become like an emotive, property of, the Gambia. So really easing out, of the Dalasi, for example, will be a very, very difficult, political decision, because, like I said, it's like an emotive issue. It's seen as a symbol of our independence, our sovereignty, our freedom, our republicanism. There's this sentimental, attachment to it. But having said that, in '71, we migrated, from the pound and the shilling and the pence, to Dalasi. And Sirif Diba, who was then the finance minister, with a handful of, technocrats, was able to ensure a seamless, transition, from, the West Africa Currency Board, to the central, to the Gambia Currency Board, to the Central Bank of the Gambia. But I believe the lack of political will, as he said, is not idle, is as a result of also a consideration of the sentimentality attached to our currencies, be it Naira or CD or Dalasi or Leon.
Was it necessary for Anglophone West Africa to fragment and go for their own different currencies after independence?
Well, this happened just after independence. Every attempt was being made to show to the whole world that we are independent. So the flag was part of, the evidence, if you like, the smoking gun, that we are independent. The anthem, our armies. Well, yeah, no, I'm coming. Our armies, and then the currencies, because when the West Africa Currency Board, was established in 1928, the belief was this would be like a currency, that would serve all the 4 British, colonies. Ghana came on Nkrumah and opted out. 3 years later, Nigeria opted out, for the Naira. In '61, Sir Milton Maga opted out, for the Leon. So it was natural that Sadauda would also opt out, after Republican status was achieved,
now we want
for the Dalasi.
The same thing. We want to unite and have one common currency when we've already opted out. Was it a mistake?
Well, he's an economist.
Was that a mistake?
But as a historian, I would say, just as a historian, I would really want us to spend more time reflecting on whether we should abandon our Dalasi. The British have refused and are holding on to their pound, and I think it has served them well. He will correct me.
I think the notion of nation state is fading. And basically, as a historian, I understand his point, but it's an exercise in futility. Today, in the next 5 years, national currencies will be redundant and it will be taken over by digital currency. Bitcoin, whether we like it or not, will be basically the transaction currency for the world. It's happening. It's still in its infancy state, kind of primitive, but in the next 5 years, global transactions will be unit and based on bitcoins, whether we like it or not. Then to the issue, as a historian, again, he made reference about independence and the currency board. I always want to tell my historian friends that independence was a liability that the colonials decided to give away. Why? If you look at all our countries, we got independent immediately after World War II.
Yeah.
What happened? The Marshall Plan. Europe was bailed out because Europe couldn't support themselves. And we were supported by Europe. So they were forced to give us independence. It's not that we wanted independence. We were a contingent liability on their expenditures. But when they gave us independence, they wanted to control our commodities. So Milton Magai and the Nigerian president at the time, when they deserted the currency board, they saw exploitation that the French are still doing today. So that was a good foresight, because the raison d'etre for what the British were trying to do was not in the best interest of Africa and West Africans, for that matter.
Well, you don't think we could have modified? We could have adopted the institution and modified, domesticated to our own interests. For example, WAEC. We took over WAEC, and now it's working for us. We domesticated it.
Hindsight is 20/20, and if you look at the historical context at the time, we were high on steroid, and the steroid is called independence. Our notion and understanding of independence, like the African or the Wolof will say, Munsa Bopa, Gadusa Bopa, Gomsa Bopa, was an ideal we believe in, but we never lived by those ideals because we were still living on handouts. So going alone, you know, kind of reinforced the notion of independence, but it wasn't practical.
Okay.
Well, yes, you had the West Africa Currency Board, you are right. You had the West African Examinations Council. You had the West African Airways. You know, I mean, you had all these, you know, like, transboundary, you know, institutions. But I agree with him there. I mean, we were all eager to really decolonize, and not only decolonize, but for the evidence to be there, for the smoking gun of decolonization to be there. So, you know, we opted out, you know, and each had their own currency.
Okay. So the future, what do you think the future will bring? Would this thing work? Would we one day see ourselves using the ECO?
Absolutely, and I will tell you why. The world, the way it's moving today, we either play or get played. And today, we don't have a bargaining power as nation states. So we are better off having a union. And events that are happening, coming forward, will force us to accelerate what we don't like. But I think the ball is set in motion. Like it or not, a common currency will be here to stay, because you're talking about the Africa Free Trade Agreement. You know, we need to make sure that we start working in groups, because without that, we will not be effective nation states. Because globalization today, you look at the Malaysia-Indonesia area, you look at BRICS, everyone is coming into an arrangement where it's communal based. So sooner or later, it's going to happen. But hopefully...
Except the British, who decided to leave the...
Well, that's also a sentimental reason. I mean, Britain is foolhardy going it alone, because now they're suffering from labor, and precisely so, because they're on their own. Common markets do have a lot of benefits, and the benefits of common market is to give you better pricing, is to give you better availability to resources, i.e. labor, finance, or whatever. And today, trucking is a problem coming into England from the rest of the Eurozone.
They've lost most of their drivers who are coming from the eastern part of Europe.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Now we move on to this deal between the United Kingdom and Rwanda to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. What do you make of it, Hasbi?
From the archives I saw this morning, you know, as I was preparing for this program, that exactly in 1945-46, the Gambia was paid money to accept Ukrainian and Polish refugees. You know, this was
World War II.
Okay, after the like the Nazi, failed in the attempt, to subdue Russia. I mean, you had all these, tens of thousands of Polish and Ukrainians.
Not only Gambia,
So,
Uganda as well.
Uganda, in fact, 7 African countries, were paid money, to, temporarily accept. In fact, there was a big, refugee camp at where the Fajala Hotel is now located. So this was like a transit point. So really, I think, it is you, the journalists, who have tried to make, like a mountain out of this molehill. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I have a different view, and first, I will talk being in the mind of Kagame. It may be an immoral thing for most of us.
Kagame, that's the president of Rwanda.
Yes, what he has done, but basically, he's trying to show Africans that we should be dignified enough not to be refugees in places we're not liked, accepted, or wanted. So I understand him from that point of view, and he is taking people and giving them skills. And another thing he has done silently that people are not seeing, the notion of Pan-Africanism, he has really brought it forward because he is bringing, diverse, Africans into Rwanda and allowing them to mainstream into Rwandan society. And I think that's a plus for Africa because we need to make sure a Gambian can freely live anywhere in Africa and another African can freely live in the Gambia. So on that point, I understand and I appreciate what he has done. But on the downside, African Union should now think of having what you call a common foreign policy objective. We cannot call ourselves a union if we don't speak with one voice, if everyone happens to have his or her own foreign policy need. So what has happened in Rwanda has shown the weakness of the union. What has happened in Rwanda has now created a need for us to have a foreign policy, a common foreign policy, whereby Africa talks with one voice on global issues.
Okay. Would it be fair to say Rwanda, a developing country, is helping the United Kingdom, a developed country, to solve its problems?
I won't see it that way. I don't think Kagame is in it for the money. And like I said, I don't think they're trying to help Europe. Kagame is trying to make a statement to us, Africans. Let them not sit there in asylum homes doing nothing. I'll bring them here and give them skills.
Yeah, but it's not only Africans. It's anyone who comes to the United Kingdom illegally.
Yeah, but predominantly we know who the problem is. So it's our problem. And what he is doing, he's bringing the case closer to home. And why are our people going out for destitution?
In 2019, Rwanda did take some refugees or asylum seekers or migrants, whatever term you want to use, who were in Libya, Eritreans, Sudanese, and many other people. But analysts are saying this case is different. These are people who are in a safe country. Probably nothing is wrong with them there. Why would the United Kingdom pay them to host these people when they could have solved that problem in the United Kingdom?
Well, I believe I want to agree with him. I think Kagame has done a wonderful thing. I think it is in the Pan-Africanist spirit. Like he said, it is more for the prestige of Africa that he has done this, than for the money that the Home Office will be giving him. And I think also the other aspect worth noting is also the geopolitical aspect. Kagame is consciously carving out a very, very powerful voice for Rwanda on the world stage, such that small states like the Gambia, like Rwanda is, should really borrow a leaf from this, that you can be small but not insignificant when it comes to playing a part to solve global issues.
Would you, Young, can you look at it as the same as when Australia was sending migrants to Nauru and some to Papua New Guinea to be processed there? Is it the same?
It's not the same. I think the English, basically, they have a liability, refugees. They want to pass it on to someone else. Kagame has seen this as an opportunity. The opportunity is, give me money. I will give these people skills. I will create a life for them. So for me, this is a model. And this model should teach us something, number one. But number two, as nation states within Africa, we should start looking inward. Why are our people leaving our shores? Lack of economic opportunities, poor visibility in terms of growth prospects as individuals. Why are these things happening? Because our investment on the soft side of development, see, development has two sides, the soft side and the hard side. And most African countries, Gambia included, we think development is what you see, feel, and touch, roads. And development starts with two things: creating a human being, educating a human being, giving a human being good medical access, and giving a human being good economic opportunities. Then with that, we can build a nation. And we haven't done a good job doing that. And now Kagame is going to train people.
But you think those are the only factors that are forcing people to move? Because some of these people crossed the English Channel from France to the United Kingdom. They could have stayed in France.
No, but they're not French.
Which arguably has the same development or whatever indicators as the United Kingdom.
Not really. I mean, you need to understand one thing. There is what you call point of saturation in the labor market. Right now, the English market, labor market, needs more work or workers than the French. So they're looking for opportunities. So if you can stay in France and make money, you will stay. But if it's difficult, you want to move further.
But you are not needed there.
Well, that's not it. The one who is looking for survival cares less about whether he or she is needed. But when things like this happen, it's always good for African nations to be inward looking. The biggest problem with Africa, we tend to outsource our social deliverables to others to do for us. It's not the responsibility of England to take care of our people. And it's a shame on all of us African states clamoring and complaining about what Kagame is doing rather than solving the structural inequalities that are inherent in our system, forcing our kids to take the desert, to try and cross the Mediterranean and the English Channel.
Hazum, a good point.
Well, yes, I think Kagame is hosting the Commonwealth summit next week. I think this will be one of the highlights of that. Like his colleagues in the Commonwealth, I think should be proud of him, particularly members of the Commonwealth, who are from Africa. Because for a very long time, and Kwame Nkrumah had bemoaned this. That despite our size, for a very long time, we had been, relegated to the back seat. When it came to solving international, pressing, issues. And here is Kagame finally, telling the whole world that Africa, can be a major player in solving international, crisis. And I think it's something that all of us as Africans, like he said, should be proud of. It is in the Pan-African spirit.
Thank you, historian Hazum Sise and economist Nyan Jai. That's it for this edition of The World Today.